My wife handed me divorce papers with my morning coffee, expecting tears and begging. Instead, I smiled and signed every page without reading them. She thought she was destroying me, but she had no idea I'd been 3 steps ahead for months. What happened next completely shattered her world. My name is William Winters. I'm 48 years old, and I run an IT consulting business that helps small companies set up their computer systems. It's steady work, pays well enough to keep us comfortable in our house in Riverside Heights. At least, it kept us comfortable until the morning I found those divorce papers sitting on the kitchen counter like a restaurant bill. Charlotte had positioned them right next to my coffee mug. Not accidentally, mind you. She's always been precise about these things, arranging everything just so. The papers were crisp, obviously fresh from some downtown law office that charged by the hour just to breathe their air. I picked up my coffee first, took a long sip, and stared at the legal documents. 22 years of marriage reduced to a stack of forms with little yellow sticky notes marking where I needed to sign. Charlotte walked in from the hallway, still in her yoga clothes. She'd been going to those classes 3 times a week for the past year, though I'd started noticing she never seemed particularly flexible when she came home. "I want a divorce, William," she announced, not even looking at me. She was fidgeting with her water bottle, unscrewing and rescrewing the cap like it was the most important task in the world. I set down my mug and really looked at the papers for the first time. Everything was already filled out, neat and organized. She thought this through, probably spent weeks planning it. "All right," I said, reaching for the pen she'd thoughtfully placed next to the documents. "Works for me." The silence that followed was something else. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she processed my response. She'd probably rehearsed this scene a dozen times, maybe even practiced it in front of her bathroom mirror. But I'm guessing none of her rehearsals included me, just agreeing. I started signing the papers, 1 page at a time. My signature looked the same as it always did, steady, clear, no shaking hands or dramatic flourishes. Just William Winters doing what William Winters does, handling business efficiently. "That's it," Charlotte finally asked, her voice pitched higher than normal. "You're not going to ask why? You're not going to fight for us?" I looked up at her then, really looked. She was beautiful, no denying that. 45 years old, and she could still turn heads when she walked into a room. But there was something different in her eyes now, something that had been growing for months. Distance, maybe, or guilt. "Should I fight for us, Charlotte?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've already made up your mind about everything." She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, then closed it again. I finished signing the last page and slid the papers back across the counter to her. "There you go," I said, picking up my coffee again. "All set." Charlotte stood there for another minute, maybe waiting for me to break down or beg her to reconsider. When that didn't happen, she gathered up the papers and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I sat there drinking my coffee, listening to her footsteps echo through the house, and realized I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there. The truth is, I'd been collecting evidence for months without even realizing it. Not because I was trying to build a case against Charlotte, but because when you work in IT, you notice patterns. Data doesn't lie, and neither do credit card statements. It started with small things. Charlotte had always been predictable with money. Groceries on Tuesdays, gas on weekends, her monthly hair appointment on the first Friday. But around 6 months ago, new charges started appearing. Expensive lunches at restaurants I never heard of. Hotel bookings in our own city. Why would someone need a hotel room 20 minutes from home? Then there was the perfume. Charlotte had worn the same scent for years, something light and floral she'd picked up at Nordstrom. But lately, when she came home from her book club meetings, there was something different. Heavier, more exotic. The kind of fragrance that clings to clothes when you've been somewhere you shouldn't be. The biggest red flag was her phone behavior. Charlotte used to leave her phone everywhere: kitchen counter, coffee table, bathroom sink. Now it was glued to her hand, face down whenever she set it down, and she developed this habit of taking it to the bathroom every single time. But the real smoking gun was her car's GPS history. Last month, I'd helped her update the navigation system when it started glitching. While I was scrolling through recent destinations to clear some memory, I noticed addresses that didn't match her usual routine. A downtown apartment complex, a wine bar in the business district, places Charlotte had never mentioned visiting. I didn't confront her about any of it. What was the point? If someone wants to leave, they're going to leave regardless of what you say or do. And honestly, part of me was curious to see how long she'd keep up the charade. The morning she handed me those papers, I felt something close to relief. Not because I wanted our marriage to end, but because the pretending was finally over. No more wondering if I was imagining things. No more second-guessing myself when she came home with stories that didn't quite add up. Charlotte was upstairs now, probably calling her lawyer to confirm the papers were signed. I could hear her voice through the ceiling, excited and animated in a way she hadn't sounded around me in months. I finished my coffee and opened my laptop again. My clients were depending on me to manage their portfolios, and the market doesn't care about personal drama. Besides, staying busy would keep my mind off the fact that my wife of 22 years had just walked out of my life as casually as she'd walk out of a grocery store. Funny thing about endings, sometimes they feel more like beginnings. 3 days after Charlotte got her signed papers, she assembled her crisis management team at Bella Vista, that overpriced brunch place downtown, where they charge $15 for avocado toast and call it artisanal. I knew about the meeting because Paige Barrett posted a photo of their mimosa tower on Instagram with a caption, "Supporting my girl through tough times." Paige had been Charlotte's closest friend since college, though I'd never understood why. She was the type of woman who collected other people's drama, like some folks collect vintage wine. Always stirring the pot, always ready with advice that somehow made situations worse instead of better. The group included Rachel Stone, who'd been divorced twice and treated it like a competitive sport, and Michelle Harper, whose main qualification for giving relationship advice was that she'd been married to the same guy for 15 years despite clearly despising him. I found out about their entire conversation because Rachel, bless her heart, had a few too many mimosas and called me later that evening. Rachel had always liked me better than she liked Charlotte, probably because I'd helped her navigate her second divorce settlement without charging her my usual consulting fee. "William," Rachel said when I answered, her words slightly slurred, "I just wanted you to know that your wife is completely delusional." "How so?" I asked, genuinely curious. "She's sitting there telling us how you just signed the papers without a fight, like you didn't care about 22 years of marriage," Rachel explained. "She's painting you as this cold, heartless man who threw away your relationship without even asking why." I leaned back in my desk chair, smiling despite myself. "And what did you ladies think about that?" "Well, Paige and Michelle were eating it up, making all the right sympathetic noises," Rachel said. "But I've known you for 8 years, William. You're not cold. You're smart. And if you didn't fight for that marriage, it's because you already knew it wasn't worth fighting for." Rachel was sharper than people gave her credit for. "What else did Charlotte say?" "Oh, she's got this whole narrative worked out," Rachel continued. "Poor abandoned wife, cruel husband who wouldn't even discuss things. She's milking it for everything it's worth. But here's the thing. When Paige asked if she was sad about losing you, Charlotte couldn't give a straight answer. She kept talking about moving forward and new chapters like she was reading from a self-help book. After I hung up with Rachel, I sat in my home office for a while, thinking. Charlotte was doing exactly what I'd expected, playing the victim, controlling the story. But there was something satisfying about knowing that at least one person saw through the performance. The truth was, I wasn't angry about Charlotte's version of events. If she needed to paint me as the villain to make herself feel better about cheating, that was her business. I had bigger things to worry about than managing other people's opinions of me. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved through the house like a surgeon, precisely removing everything that belonged to me while leaving Charlotte's world completely intact. I wasn't being cruel. I was being practical. Clean breaks heal faster than messy ones. I started with my home office, carefully packing my computer equipment, client files, and the framed photo of my parents that had sat on my desk for 10 years. Charlotte walked by a few times while I was working, but she never said anything. Just watched me dismantle my space with the same clinical detachment I'd shown when signing her papers. My clothes came next. 22 years of marriage accumulates a lot of clothing, but I only took what I'd bought myself or genuinely cared about. The expensive suit Charlotte had picked out for important occasions stayed in the closet. If she wanted to remember me through fabric choices, she was welcome to keep those reminders. The hardest part was deciding what to do about her shared belongings. The leather couch we bought for our 5th anniversary, the dining room set from her parents, The coffee maker that had served us breakfast every morning for 3 years. All of it stayed. I wasn't interested in fighting over furniture or splitting up kitchen appliances like we were college roommates moving out of a dorm. But I had to take a few things that mattered. The toolbox my father had given me when I bought my first house. The signed baseball from when I'd taken a client to a Cardinals game and caught a foul ball. The small wooden box where I kept cufflinks and the watch Charlotte had given me for our 10th anniversary, back when gifts between us still meant something. The process took exactly 12 days. Each evening, I'd load another box into my truck and drive it to the storage unit I'd rented across town. Charlotte never asked where I was taking things or whether I needed help. She just continued with her routine: gym, book club, mysterious phone calls taken behind closed doors. On the final day, I walked through the house one last time, checking for anything I might have missed. The place already felt different, like a hotel room after checkout. Clean, neutral, ready for the next occupant. I left my house key on the kitchen counter, right where Charlotte had placed those divorce papers 2 weeks earlier. No note, no dramatic gesture, just practical handover of property. By sunset, I was standing in my new apartment, looking out at a view that belonged entirely to me. Charlotte would come home to find my absence like a perfectly cut puzzle piece, obvious in its shape, but leaving the overall picture surprisingly complete without it. My new apartment was in Highland Ridge, a modern complex 15 minutes from my old house, but worlds away in every way that mattered. Top floor, corner unit, floor-to-ceiling windows facing east toward the mountains. The rent was reasonable, the building had solid security, and most importantly, nobody there knew me as Charlotte's husband. I furnished the place minimally, just what I needed to function. A comfortable couch, a decent dining table that doubled as a workspace, and a bedroom set that fit my actual sleeping habits instead of Charlotte's decorating fantasies. No throw pillows, no accent pieces, no furniture that looked good but served no practical purpose. The best part was setting up my home office exactly the way I wanted it. 3 monitors for managing multiple client accounts simultaneously, a proper ergonomic chair, and a filing system that made sense to me instead of trying to accommodate someone else's organizational preferences. Within a week, I was more productive than I'd been in months. Client calls went smoother when I wasn't wondering if Charlotte was listening from the hallway. Financial reports got completed faster when I wasn't constantly interrupted by requests to move my computer stuff, so she could use the dining room for whatever craft projects she discovered online. The silence in my new place was different too. Not the tense, walking on eggshells quiet that had filled the house lately, but genuine peace. I could work late without feeling guilty, watch whatever I wanted on television, and eat dinner at the kitchen counter without having to make conversation about Charlotte's book club drama. About 2 weeks after I'd moved out, Charlotte started trying to reach me. First, it was a text asking about the warranty information for the refrigerator, something she could have found in the kitchen drawer where we'd kept appliance manuals for 10 years. Then a call about whether I'd taken the spare garage door opener. Small things, obviously just excuses to make contact. I answered her questions politely, but briefly. The refrigerator warranty was in the kitchen drawer. No, I hadn't taken the garage door opener. It was probably in her car's glove compartment where she always kept it. I didn't ask how she was doing or invite longer conversations. Just provided the information she'd requested and moved on. The strange thing was how normal it felt to live alone again. I'd been on my own for 6 years before I married Charlotte, and apparently, those skills hadn't disappeared. I cooked meals I actually wanted to eat, kept the apartment at a temperature that made sense, and went to bed when I was tired instead of when someone else decided it was time. For the first time in years, I was living my life instead of accommodating someone else's version of what my life should look like. Charlotte's attempts to contact me became more frequent and less practical as the weeks passed. What started as legitimate questions about household items gradually shifted into something else, probing messages that felt more like fishing expeditions than actual requests for information. "William," she texted one evening, "I can't find the manual for the lawnmower. Do you remember where we put it?" The manual was in the garage, hanging on the pegboard where it had been for 3 years. Charlotte knew exactly where it was. She was the one who'd organized that pegboard system in the first place, complete with labeled hooks and plastic sleeves for all the equipment documentation. I texted back the location and left it at that. No questions about why she needed it. No offers to come over and help with lawnmower maintenance. Just facts. A few days later, She called while I was reviewing a client's retirement portfolio. I almost didn't answer, but Charlotte had never been the type to call repeatedly, so I figured it might be genuinely important. "Hi, William," she said when I picked up. Her voice had that carefully casual tone people use when they're trying to sound normal about something that's clearly bothering them. "I was just wondering if we could maybe talk sometime." "About things." "What kind of things?" I asked, minimizing the spreadsheet on my screen, but not closing it entirely. "Well, I feel like this whole divorce situation happened so fast," Charlotte said. "I mean, we were married for 22 years. Don't you think we owe it to ourselves to at least discuss what went wrong?" I leaned back in my desk chair, looking out at the mountains in the distance. "Charlotte, you handed me divorce papers that were already filled out. You'd obviously thought about this for a while before that morning. What's left to discuss?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Charlotte said, "I just think it's strange that you didn't even ask why I wanted the divorce. Most people would want to understand what happened. Most people probably don't spend 6 months watching their spouse come home with someone else's cologne on their clothes." I replied, keeping my voice conversational. Another long pause. "I don't know what you mean by that." "Sure you do," I said. "But it doesn't matter now. You wanted out, you got out. We're both free to move forward however we want." "But William Dash," she started. "Charlotte," I interrupted gently. "I need to get back to work. Was there anything else you actually needed?" She hung up without answering. I turned back to my computer screen and finished reviewing the retirement portfolio, but part of my mind stayed focused on that phone call. Charlotte wasn't reaching out because she missed me or regretted her decision. She was reaching out because my reaction wasn't fitting her narrative, and that was making her uncomfortable. She'd expected anger, drama, maybe desperate attempts to win her back. Instead, she got practical responses and polite disengagement. And apparently, that was somehow worse than the explosive confrontation she'd been prepared to handle. The call came on a Thursday evening while I was debugging a client's network configuration. The number wasn't in my contacts, but something about the area code made me answer. "Dad." I nearly dropped my phone. Sebastian's voice, deeper now than when I'd last heard it 3 years ago, but unmistakably my son. "Sebastian," I said, closing my laptop immediately. "Where are you?" "Phoenix," he replied. "I just heard about your divorce. Mom called me yesterday." My ex-wife Linda had remarried when Sebastian was 12 and moved to Arizona with her new husband. Our son had chosen to stay with them through high school, and I'd respected that decision, even though it meant seeing him only during summer breaks and holidays. Now he was 26, running his own software development company, and apparently keeping tabs on my life from 2 states away. "How much did your mother tell you?" I asked, genuinely curious about what version of events had reached Phoenix. "Enough to know that Charlotte initiated everything and you didn't put up a fight," Sebastian said. She seemed surprised by that. Said it wasn't like you to just accept something like this without getting all the facts first. Linda knew me well enough to recognize when my behavior didn't match my character. We'd been divorced for 15 years, but our split had been amicable. Just 2 people who'd gotten married too young and grown in different directions. No cheating, no drama, just honest recognition that we wanted different things from life. "Your mother's right," I said. I had to get the facts first. Just didn't see any point in fighting over something Charlotte had already decided. "Want to tell me what really happened?" Sebastian asked. I found myself smiling. My son had inherited my analytical mind and Linda's direct communication style. He wasn't asking for gossip or drama. He wanted to understand the situation so he could respond appropriately. "Charlotte had an affair," I said simply. "I found out about it months ago, but didn't confront her. When she asked for the divorce, I figured it was easier to let her think she was in control of the narrative." "Smart," Sebastian said approvingly. "No point in giving someone ammunition they can use against you later." "But Dad, are you okay? Really okay?" The question caught me off guard. Not because Sebastian was asking, but because I realized the answer was genuinely yes. "I'm better than okay," I told him. "I'm actually doing pretty well." "Good," Sebastian said, "because I was thinking about taking a break from the Phoenix heat, maybe visiting Colorado for a few weeks. If you're up for some company." I looked around my quiet apartment, imagining Sebastian's laptop set up at my dining table, both of us working on our respective projects in comfortable silence the way we used to when he was a teenager. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that a lot." "Great. I'll book a flight for next week," Sebastian said. "Fair warning, though. I'm probably going to want to hear the whole story. And I mean the whole story. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine excitement about the future. Sebastian arrived on a Tuesday morning with 2 suitcases, a laptop bag, and the kind of confident energy that successful 26-year-olds radiate when they figured out how to make money doing what they love. He looked like a younger version of me, but with Linda's green eyes and a social ease that neither of his parents had ever possessed. "Nice place," he said, dropping his bags in the guest room and immediately gravitating toward the windows. "Great view, good natural light for working. You always did know how to pick locations." We spent the first day catching up on the basics. His company was developing custom software for medical practices, and business was booming. He bought a house in Scottsdale, was dating a nurse named Katie who sounded suspiciously perfect from his descriptions, and had started investing in real estate with the confidence of someone who'd never experienced a major market crash. That evening, over dinner at a steakhouse downtown, Sebastian finally asked the question I'd been expecting. "So tell me about Charlotte," he said, cutting into his ribeye with surgical precision. "What was she like when you first met her?" I thought about that for a moment. "Charming," I said finally. She was working as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup, very focused on her career, very sure of what she wanted from life. We met at a networking event, and she was the kind of woman who could work a room without making it obvious. "And when did things start going wrong?" "They didn't go wrong exactly," I said. "They just changed. Charlotte always needed to be the center of attention, but in the early years, that energy was directed outward. She was building her career, making connections, climbing the ladder. But after she hit a certain level of success, that need for attention turned inward. Our marriage became another project for her to manage." Sebastian nodded thoughtfully. "And the affair?" "Started about 6 months ago with a guy named Derek Walsh. Personal trainer, 28 years old. Exactly the kind of person Charlotte would choose if she wanted to feel young and desired again." "Did you ever think about confronting her directly?" I shook my head. What would have been the point? If someone wants to cheat, they're going to cheat. If someone wants to leave, they're going to leave. Fighting about it just gives them more ammunition to use against you later. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, studying me with those analytical green eyes. "You know what's interesting, Dad? You're handling this divorce better than Mom handled yours. And that one was mutual." He was right. Linda and I had spent months in counseling, trying to figure out how to untangle 15 years of shared life without destroying each other in the process. This felt cleaner somehow, maybe because I'd seen it coming. "Maybe I learned something from the first time around," I said. "Or maybe," Sebastian suggested, "Charlotte just wasn't worth the kind of fight Mom was." That observation hung in the air between us, and I realized my son had just summarized something I'd been feeling, but hadn't been able to articulate. Some relationships are worth fighting for, and some aren't. The trick is knowing the difference. It was raining the kind of steady, persistent rain that makes you question why anyone chooses to live in Colorado when Sebastian and I were just finishing dinner. We'd ordered Italian takeout and were discussing his plans to expand his software company when the building's front desk called. "Mr. Winters," the security guard said, "there's a woman here asking to see you. Says her name is Charlotte Winters, and she's your wife." I glanced at Sebastian, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Let her come up," I told the guard. "You want me to disappear for a while?" Sebastian asked, already knowing the answer. "Actually, no," I said, clearing our dinner containers from the coffee table. "Stay right where you are. I have a feeling this conversation might benefit from a witness." 5 minutes later, Charlotte knocked on my door. When I opened it, she looked like she'd been caught in the rain for longer than the elevator ride suggested. Her hair was damp, her makeup slightly smudged, and she was wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that were supposed to look effortless, but probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. "William," she said, stepping into my apartment without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." She stopped short when she saw Sebastian sitting on my couch, laptop open, looking completely at home. For a moment, her composure slipped, and I saw genuine confusion in her eyes. "Charlotte," I said calmly, "this is my son Sebastian." "Sebastian, this is Charlotte." Sebastian stood up and extended his hand with the kind of polite professionalism he'd learned in business meetings. "Nice to meet you, Charlotte. Dad's told me a lot about you." Charlotte shook his hand automatically, but I could see her mind racing. In all our years of marriage, Sebastian had visited maybe 3 times, always briefly, always during holidays when Charlotte was too busy with her own family obligations to pay much attention to him. "I didn't know you were visiting," Charlotte said, still trying to process Sebastian's presence. "I decided to take some time off from Phoenix," Sebastian replied easily. "Spend some quality time with my father during his transition." The way he said transition made it clear he knew exactly what kind of transition we were discussing. Charlotte's eyes darted between Sebastian and me, probably calculating how much he knew about her situation. "William," she said, turning back to me, "I really think we should talk privately. Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of Sebastian," I replied, settling into my chair. "He's family." Charlotte stood there for a moment, clearly thrown off script. She'd probably rehearsed this conversation, maybe even practiced it in her car before coming up. But whatever she planned hadn't included an audience, especially not an audience who understood exactly why our marriage had ended. "I froze when I saw who you were having dinner with," Charlotte said finally, her voice smaller than usual. "I mean, I didn't expect. I thought you'd be alone." Sebastian closed his laptop and looked between us with the kind of alert attention he usually reserved for debugging complex code problems. "Why would you expect me to be alone?" I asked, genuinely curious about her reasoning. Charlotte's mouth opened, then closed. Whatever answer she prepared obviously didn't work with Sebastian sitting 3 feet away, taking in every word. Charlotte stood in my living room for almost a full minute, clearly struggling to recalibrate her approach. She'd obviously come here expecting to find me isolated, maybe depressed, certainly willing to engage in whatever drama she'd scripted for this moment. Instead, she'd walked into a scene that looked suspiciously like contentment. "I don't understand how you can just move on like this," she said finally, gesturing vaguely at my apartment, at Sebastian, at the life I'd built without her. 22 years, William. Don't they mean anything to you?" Sebastian shifted slightly on the couch, and I caught his eye. There was something in his expression, not judgment exactly, but evaluation. He was watching Charlotte the same way he'd analyze a software problem, looking for the logic behind her statements. "They meant everything to me," I said quietly, "right up until you decided they didn't mean anything to you." "That's not fair," Charlotte protested. "You don't know what I was going through. You don't know how lonely I felt, how disconnected we'd become." "You're right," I agreed. "I don't know those things, because you never told me. Instead, you told Derek Walsh." The name hit Charlotte like a physical blow. Her face went pale, and she took a step backward. "How did you dash?" she started. "Hotel charges on her credit card," I said simply. "Phone records. GPS history from your car." "Charlotte, I work in IT. Digital footprints are kind of my specialty." Sebastian made a small sound that might have been approval. Charlotte looked between us again, probably realizing for the first time that she'd been outmaneuvered from the beginning. "So you knew," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This whole time you knew." "I knew," I confirmed. "And I also knew that confronting you about it would just create more drama without changing anything. You'd already decided what you wanted. I just made it easier for you to get it." Charlotte sat down heavily in the chair across from me, like her legs had suddenly stopped working properly. I thought you'd fight for us. I thought you'd at least try to save our marriage." "Why would I fight to keep someone who didn't want to be kept?" I asked. "That's not love, Charlotte. That's desperation." Sebastian closed his laptop completely now, giving the conversation his full attention. I could see him processing everything, not just the words but the dynamics, the way Charlotte had expected one response and gotten something completely different. "I made a mistake," Charlotte said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Derek and it's over. It was never really anything serious. I got confused. I'm sorry it didn't work out," I said, and I meant it. Not because I wanted Charlotte back, but because I didn't wish pain on anyone, even someone who'd caused me plenty of it. "William," she said, leaning forward in her chair, "is there any chance we could try again? Start over?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that whatever I'd once felt for Charlotte had transformed into something else entirely. Not hatred, not anger, just distance. Like looking at a photograph of a place you used to live but could barely remember. "No," I said gently. "There isn't." Charlotte sat there for another moment, then stood up slowly. "I should go." I walked her to the door, and As she stepped into the hallway, she turned back one more time. "I hope you're happy, William," she said, and for the first time since she'd arrived, her voice sounded genuinely sincere. "I am," I told her. "I really am." After she left, Sebastian and I sat in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, he opened his laptop again and said, "Well, that was educational. What did you think?" I asked. "I think," Sebastian said, typing something into his computer, "you handled that exactly right. And I think you're going to be just fine without her." Looking around my apartment, at my son working on his laptop, at the life I'd built for myself, at the peace I'd found in my own space, I realized he was absolutely right.